Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode 284 of the ThoughtTM Navigating Now Virtual Roundtable Series. I'm Anthony Ewing, co-founder, chief brand officer here at ThoughtTM, and I am joined by Mary Monastyrsky. She is an associate director here at ThoughtTM, and this is maybe one of our favorite times of the year. A couple of things drop this year that we get really excited about. A lot on the latest and greatest in learning and development trends. We love our LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. And right on the back of that is a conference that is near and dear to our hearts here at ThoughtTM. And it's chock full of insights and people that just kind of get it in the learning space. And that is the LTEN conference in Orlando that we just got back from last week. And if you don't know LTEN, it's a wonderful organization, particularly for life sciences learning and development practitioners. So it's a bit of a micro community within, the broader learning and talent development space. And what we love about this community is that, it's so unique in that every one of its members is acutely focused on driving great learning experiences within the life sciences space. And what we love about it is that it's a small community. So, you can go to conferences, and we've been to a handful that have 3, 5, 7,000 people. This is, right in that kind of 2,000 person range. It's extremely manageable. And oftentimes we see a lot of our own clients down there. Mary did not attend LTEN. I did, but Mary is very much at the forefront of working with so many life sciences learning leaders and leaders across pharma and biotech. She also plays in different industries. And so I thought, Mary, we'd bring you in to help share a little bit of perspective that came back from Orlando in this really exciting 3 or 4 days. So welcome, Mary, and thank you for joining.
Thanks, Anthony. Happy to be here. Hopefully I can shed some light on some life science in L&D perspective, or just react in terms of L&D in general, kind of how this plays back. Well, you heard the conference plays back in the learning space, so happy to be here.
We always know you've got a reaction or two, so that's why we love you on this platform. Before we dive in, Mary, what's one thing that you're working on this week that you're really excited about?
Oh my gosh, this week it has been mainly development for a couple of in-person experiences I'm supporting the delivery of in July. So we've been spending a lot of time thinking of, how can we not just make this great development when the team is all together, when this org is all together on site, but how can we make it a really human-centric, memorable team experience for them? So it's been a lot of great ideation around that of, in the breaks, in the small and big moments, how we can make it really meaningful.
I love that. And that's a good kind of segue into one of the big insights that came from the LTEN conference last week. We've attended this conference year over year. LTEN does such a great job of putting together wonderful programming that is really meeting the moment for where we're at in learning and development. In years past, we couldn't have avoided, and still we can't avoid the elephant in the room, which is AI, right? Anytime I say AI, I think of that commercial, AI, because that's sometimes how we feel. We're just being bombarded with kind of, messaging, both doomful and delightful around AI. And one of the things that I think was unique about this year at LTEN is that AI maybe wasn't the center of conversation. We've accepted that this new technology is a big part of what we do in designing and delivering great learning experiences, and we could have a whole episode on that. But what was so unique about this year is with that acceptance comes also the recognition that there are so many other aspects of the learning experience that are not tech-centric. And so the first hot take is that this AI transformation really starts with human centricity. And that was so clear at LTEN. For example, in the 4 days, they had 2 incredible keynote speakers, both of whom really focused on the human side of leading the learning within organizations. And we'll talk about one in a bit, but Dr. Keith Keating, I think, is a wonderful example of somebody who, he's a renowned leader in the L&D field. He also knows a lot about AI and the different tools that we might bring to the L&D table. But he spent an entire keynote in front of almost 2,000 people talking about how influence within organizations is this like critical component. Human influence, the way that we, reach others within the organization, the way that we advocate for learning and development, and not just advocate, but really almost demand the attention and respect that we've earned in kind of the front lines of learning and development. And so there was this thesis that maybe developed over the few days, and I think everybody was really embracing it, that yes, there are AI tools that can accelerate great learning experiences, but how we differentiate in a world of AI now is making learning more human-centric. And Mary, you just talked about some in-person experiences that you're acutely designing for that probably don't involve the participants prompting in ChatGPT. So I'm curious, as a human-centered learning designer, what are your thoughts on this first hot take that AI transformation starts with human centricity?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because I feel like maybe the reason you didn't hear about AI that much directly in the conference in relation to what you did here as human centricity is like it's fundamentally changing the value proposition of what a learning team can bring. And like we're all facing the same challenge, whether you're in learning or a different part of org or not, which is AI is making things simpler, faster, some of those more foundational tasks easier. Like in the learning space, people can find tips on how to better communicate at their fingertips, right? So what's the value proposition learning and development has or can have in this new world? And it's the things that maybe necessarily AI can't touch, which is that what it feels like, the mental energy of doing learning in a really in-depth way, whether that's in person, whether that's in a really well-tailored virtual experience. Like what are really going beyond just knowledge absorption that AI can now do? Like how do we make learning like real in other ways? So I feel like what you're speaking to is a little bit of this evolution of the value proposition that L&D is trying to bring forward now in this new reality, in this new world. So I guess my hot take is it's not, I guess like this focus is inevitable of like us trying to find our place in the value of the organization, in the value of like really driving a workforce. And it's a really important shift. I feel like that is a long time coming.
Yeah.
L&D value is never going to come from here's the giant catalog of classes you can access on our platform, right?
Yeah.
It's the true change we're able to drive in an organization. So the fact of like, we're focusing on this AI transformation in terms of what does it mean for us as humans? Like that's where the value that we can drive really is.
Yeah, I love that. You got me thinking about even like our focus at Thoughtium. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary. And I can tell you that 10 years ago, our mission was to design and deliver great learning experiences. That is very much still our mission today. And so it was really great. We had an opportunity to get in front of a large group of folks at LTEN in Orlando last week. And I felt very proud to get in front of the room and to say, we've spent 10 years acutely focused on the human side of learning. And I even kind of proclaimed that we are not your AI transformation partner of choice. And it was a little like visceral in the room, but it was so fun to say. And I think we as a team have been having a lot of fun, like double and tripling down on the human centricity of gathering and working and learning together. So much so that we've started our own book club. I've got this book here, Unreasonable Hospitality. And this book has kind of gone viral within the Thoughtium sphere, if there is a Thoughtium sphere. Our team is just so excited about this. And the few folks that have started this book have become almost like these evangelists of this concept of unreasonable hospitality, which is how do we create these incredible moments of magic, however simple or benign. And in a world where the whole zeitgeist is full of AI efficiencies and things of that nature, those touch points, those magical touch points become a huge differentiator. So it's great to be in this space, to feel like we don't necessarily have to go left when the industry is going left. We can go right.
Right.
Mary, you touched on maybe already the second kind of hot take that came out of last week's experience down in LTEN. And that is that we do have this opportunity to grow and communicate our value as learning practitioners, and beyond just cultivators of content and creators of content. And there was a whole session, it was a keynote session on the concept of influence and the fact that today more than ever, we have this incredible responsibility to continue to communicate the value of learning and development, to continue to create visibility into kind of the culture that we're trying to drive within our organizations. And this skill of influence became a real hot topic. So much so that we hosted a 2-hour super session at LTEN focused on some specific frameworks that we can use in everyday conversations that, again, can't come from a Claude prompt, but that really allow us to represent learning and development in the way that it should be, which is a strategic partner, somebody that, or a group that can be counted on to enable the organization and not just deliver on the ask. And so, Mary, I know you've worked with a handful of learning and development teams. I'd love to just hear, how have you seen teams struggle in the influence space? And maybe where have you seen learning and development teams really thrive in being able to demonstrate their value that they bring to the organization?
Yeah, it's such an important topic. It's I guess another interesting one in that, we've heard this idea of L&D being clear about their seat at the table, being clear about the value they have for a while, right? But it's, again, that idea of it being extra important in today's times. I feel like where I've seen maybe it generally be challenged in the L&D space, this idea of really being influential and proving that value, is when L&D is in a bit of that reactionary mode. So something I've heard quite a bit over my career, in life, I would say in life sciences or otherwise, is folks saying hey, here's something I heard from the business. AI, I feel like is a great example of hey, the business is grappling with new AI tools. They're trying to figure out how to streamline it, which tools are more effective, blah, blah, blah. And kind of the response generally from L&D is okay, let us know when you figured that out. Well, come back to us when you decide a direction to go, and we'll build learning and development to support that. And that is, to me, an example of that reactionary state when it comes to influence, especially in today's rapidly changing time. Whereas I feel like L&D practitioners or orgs that I've seen are more successful are, one, asking those questions to bring those conversations forward. They're not waiting for the answers from what's grappling within the business. And then they are bringing, I feel forward their own proactive strategy or approaches of not saying, hey, let us know what's going on in the business, of hey, I noticed this is what's going on in the business. This is what you're grappling with. Tell me more. And then here's how the learning and development efforts we're going to do this year is connected to that. So I feel a key thing I'm seeing in terms of L&D leaders or groups that are successful in this space is them challenging themselves to come forward with their own business perspective and how L&D is really driving that.
Yeah.
I've seen teams, direct, I feel the teams that are more successful are directly looking at their company strategies and then having their own L&D strategy that's these are the priorities for the year. This is what we're going to do for the year. Or they go directly to their leaders and say, and just have regular connects or listen in on meetings or go to the town halls and then come to them with hey, let's talk about this problem I'm noticing and what we might do for it. I feel that's always going to be an important skill. That's even more important when businesses are facing such rapid change.
I love that. There was a moment during one of the keynotes last week in Orlando at the LTEN conference, and it was Dr. Keating himself that kind of paused in the middle of his talk, and he asked the room, again, almost 1,500, 2,000 people, who here has an L&D vision for their team or organization that they're communicating, regularly or on a day-to-day basis. And it was less than 10% of the people raised their hand. And so it's interesting because, this is communication effectiveness and persuasion and influence. These are oftentimes, courses and modules that we're designing and delivering for our commercial teams. And yet, we're maybe the group that needs it the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, I feel like a difference in this perspective though is like from maybe what you heard versus maybe my hot take is it's not so much communicating to the business how we're valuable. It's, like being valuable to the business. It's really knowing the business, being a contributor to the business and letting L&D follow that, if that makes sense. It's not us here standing and banging our drums of like, L&D is important. We show that we're important.
Absolutely. Yeah. The actions definitely have to kind of precede the headlines.
Yeah.
But the headlines are important as well too. There's some incredible tools. The strategic blueprint process is one that we've brought a handful of learning and development teams to really get them organized around what is our value proposition. To your point, how does that show up in our day-to-day actions? And then when we really need to, how do we make sure that we can communicate that effectively? That brings us to our third hot take, and this one might be a little bit more abstract, but as I walked around the LTEN conference, we had a booth there, and there was probably 50, 60 vendors in the booth exhibit hall. Really, really some cool stuff that's happening in the L&D space. A lot of different technology and tools. At LTEN, we saw a lot of AI role playing, VR role playing. How do we supplement and augment coaching? And how do we practice having different discussions with our HCPs and our customers? And again, they were coming by way of just this like incredibly robust toolkit now that we have of different tools that we can bring in and out of the flow of learning. Very little focus on content, like very little focus on, cutting edge content, whether it be around selling skills, account management, even, therapeutic knowledge and disease state knowledge, product knowledge. And I just got the sense that, content is kind of taking a back seat to the tools that deliver the content. And it's got me thinking like, yes, of course, content is now very much a commodity. Everybody has access to the world's information now through AI, but have we over-rotated? Like, is there still a place for really good content? And I'm just curious, Mary, to hear kind of your initial reaction to that hot take.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because I feel like that idea of new tech in terms of delivering the content is still trying to crack the code. It speaks to cracking this code of how do we get people to really engage, right? How do we get people to want to be in a learning space, to like take the time out of their day to come to our class to engage? Is it, VR headset or something? Or how do we make it feel realistic, like the real world? Which I feel like is an interesting side. And I guess to your point, like content is something that is kind of has already been or is being rapidly covered by tech. But I guess to the question here of like, is that the right approach? I guess my first impression of it was, are we trying to come up with these creative modalities to make up for content that is not actually relevant or engaging or interesting or a program that's well designed, right? If we say, hey, you get to put on this VR headset or do this or do that, is that sometimes being used in a way that is just trying to create engagement from like a thoughtful question could do a job, or a really thoughtful in-person experience could do the job. So I guess it's taking a critical lens to both in a way of, hey, always coming back to that question of, is this content going to resonate with our audience? Is how we're delivering it going to get them to think or speak or act in the ways that we want? And if I think we've seen the power of that at Thaudium of, I would say like when we're thinking this in-person experience for my clients, we're not thinking of how do we necessarily bring in, VR headsets or like do these crazy things to like make it really unique or interesting. We're just being really thoughtful about like what are the conversations they want to have in the room? What's something they can learn about each other that they don't already have? What's a way we can like energize them, build commitment? And it's about what we say, what we ask, what conversations we're going to have. And people still leave our experiences, even if we don't have all the latest, that's not about having all the latest things. People still leave our experiences saying like, that was really impactful because I got to connect or think or do things in a different way I hadn't before. But I mean, I am very curious around what the tech can do in terms of like building like that connection of application in a deeper way. Simulated environments, things like that are particularly interesting to me. So the opportunity might be there. Just sometimes I feel like we lean into delivery modalities as a way to like get people involved without really being critical of what we're asking people to do.
Yeah. It's interesting when we were even putting together and designing the super session for LTEN last week, which, we delivered in front of, 50 folks. We found ourselves acknowledging that, the topic was on influence, and we found ourselves acknowledging that like there's all kinds of content and methodologies and frameworks around influence, and our job was really then to really focus on great facilitation and conversation, and a lot of what you're talking about, Mary, that kind of this like connective tissue. Like, how do we, assuming that people know a thing or two about influence, or they could go learn more about it. How do we create scenarios or simulations in this workshop environment where they're unpacking like a real world problem? And that's the type of content, if you will, that I think is going to start to become a little bit more differentiated, where the experience becomes a little bit more custom, becomes a little bit more real world. And that, again, it makes our jobs as designers and facilitators a lot more exciting, because we no longer need to kind of know the letter of the law. We just truly need to know how to facilitate people learning it. And that's where, the great opportunity for AI, I think, really exists. So
I guess until we get holograms working, facilitation, which I feel like is a long time away, facilitation and thinking through how to guide great experiences is going to continue to be important.
Yeah, and that's I think the most exciting takeaway of all of this is like the tried and true learning and development skills, design, facilitation, strategic partnership. Like, these now become the great differentiators in a world where we're just like consumed with information, knowledge, and everything is readily accessible. And this is where it's like the thought team's like, hold my beer. Like, this is the work that we've been doing, for 10 straight years. And this is the light that we love to shine on what makes learning practitionership really unique. And we're going to continue to do that, hopefully for 10 more years. Speaking of the future, I want to round out, Mary, thank you first and foremost for your perspective and just your addition to this reflection that we have on our time down in Orlando at the LTEN conference. Last question for you. We're sitting here next year. We've just gotten back from LTEN 2027. What's maybe your big bet in terms of the discussion next year? If last year was AI, this year's like, hey, we got to keep it human centric. What's the thesis that's coming out of 2027? If you had to
I have a hot take on this. So I think something that's really stuck with me that I've kind of been thinking about for the last month or so is, I believe it was Gartner let out a report that the like half of the jobs that have been removed because of AI will be kind of rehired by 2027. Mm-hmm. So my big bet is onboarding and upskilling will be a huge trend next year. Imagining that a lot of people are probably going to be stepping into new roles that were, taken away and given back to humans, I guess, put it that way. So that's my big bet. We'll see if that comes true.
I love that. Yeah, and that would be, what a gift that would be, right? If the pendulum swung back in the direction of just like, let's focus on great onboarding again. So I'm definitely here for that. Mary, thank you so much for for being a big part of today's discussion. And thank you for your learning practitionership and the leadership that you exhibit amongst our team and out in the marketplace. And I'm sure this won't be the last time you and I are on Navigating Now.
I'm sure. Thanks, Anthony.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Tune in every Thursday, 3 o'clock Central. We are live to you all. We want to thank our LinkedIn community, particularly 284 episodes in. We love bringing you leaders and leadership topics that matter most. We'll see you all.